Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid and these are the headlines. Afghan President Ashraf Ghani says releasing 400 remaining Taliban prisoners does not lie under his constitutional powers. Speaking at the Loya Jirga in Kabul, Ghani said the Taliban put the prisoner release as a condition to start the intra-Afghan negotiations, but a mutual consensus is important about the inmates convicted with serious charges. Meanwhile, the US has commended prominent Afghans holding a major meeting to free Taliban prisoners. Israel says its warplanes have targeted multiple locations on the Gaza Strip. The Israeli Defense Ministry says it struck Hamas underground infrastructure in retaliation to explosive balloon attacks. No casualties have been reported so far. In Lebanon, protesters have taken to the streets of Beirut following the blast that resulted in killing 157 people and injuring over 5,000 on Tuesday. Clashes broke out between riot police and demonstrators who are calling for the government to resign. Meanwhile, state media claims authorities have taken 16 people into custody as a part of an investigation into Port House warehouse blast. Well, that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News. Take care. Welcome back. Now for the news in detail. We begin from Afghanistan, whose President Ashraf Ghani says releasing 400 remaining Taliban prisoners does not lie under his constitutional powers. Speaking at the Loya Jirga in Kabul, Ghani said the Taliban put the prisoners' release as a condition to start the intra-Afghan negotiations. But a mutual consensus is important on the freeing the inmates convicted of serious charges. Ghani said the reason for not releasing the Taliban has been shared with the Taliban. He said the group offered to start the talks within 3 days if their prisoners were released immediately. Meanwhile, Loya Jirga Chairman Abdullah says no one will be able to win through war. Therefore, negotiations are very important. Earlier, the US commended the meeting, saying a positive outcome will remove the hurdle to start the negotiations. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has hailed the recent Security Council meeting on occupied Kashmir. In a series of tweets, Khan said the Kashmir issue has to be resolved in accordance with the relevant UNSC resolutions. He said the Security Council has the responsibility for not only maintaining global peace, but also of ensuring the implementation of its resolutions on occupied Kashmir. He added Kashmiris must be given the right of self-determination under a free and fair plebiscite. Khan said Pakistan will continue to extend all possible support to the people of occupied Valley until they secure this right. Now, Israel says its warplanes have targeted multiple locations on the Gaza Strip. The Israeli Defense Ministry says it struck Hamas underground infrastructure in retaliation to explosive balloon attacks. Israeli warplanes struck the position in Beit Lahia belonging to Izz ad-Din al-Qassam brigades. No casualties have been reported so far. This is the second escalation between Israel and Gaza this week. Earlier, Hamas said Israel is exporting its internal crisis to the Gaza Strip. Moving on, China says it firmly opposes executive orders by US President Donald Trump to ban transactions with Chinese owners of TikTok and WeChat apps. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin says Beijing will defend the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese businesses. Meanwhile, TikTok said it was shocked at the Trump administration's order and called to US courts to ensure fair treatment. The company said it will pursue all remedies to ensure the rule of law is not discarded. Earlier today, Trump signed orders banning dealings with the ByteDance and Tencent. The US alleges the apps automatically capture personal and proprietary information of American users, which is then accessible by the Chinese Communist Party. In Lebanon, anti-government protesters have taken to the streets of Beirut after the blast that killed 157 people and injured over 5,000 on Tuesday. Clashes broke out between riot police and demonstrators who are calling for the government to resign. Riot police were deployed at the protests after some demonstrators burned objects and hurled rocks at security forces. The protesters blamed the government's negligence for the blast. Since the explosion, the two government officials have resigned, saying the catastrophe has highlighted the need for a change in leadership. Meanwhile, the state media says authorities have taken 16 people into custody as a part of an investigation into the blast. The global number of COVID-19 cases has crossed 19 million, with over 714,000 deaths. This comes as the US records 2,060 more deaths and over 58,000 new infections, increasing the tally to near 4.9 million. In Brazil, 1,237 people have lost their lives to the virus in the last 24 hours, taking the fatalities tally to over 98,000. More in this report.
The coronavirus continues on its path of devastation, with keeping the Americas and Europe in its sights. The University of Washington forecasts the U.S. death toll can reach 300,000 by December if President Donald Trump goes ahead with opening schools. Mexico's death toll has crossed 50,000 mark after 819 more died in the last 24 hours. In hopes of stopping the surge of the virus, Brazil has vowed to set aside $356 million for COVID-19 vaccine developed by AstraZeneca and Oxford University.
That was a job done with the Health Ministry, the Oswaldo Cruz Foundation, with the AstraZeneca company, and with Oxford University in London, England. We studied all the vaccines, and this is the most promising so far and should start being used in the population from December or January next year.
In Europe, the second wave of the coronavirus is surging as many countries reimpose lockdowns to curb further transmission. The UK is set to remove Belgium, Andorra and Bahamas from safe travel list amid fresh cases being reported in the countries. Denmark has dropped plans to lift curbs on public gatherings, originally planned for this month, after seeing a spike in infections. France has reported more than 1,600 cases for the second running day. As many countries around the world work on cure against the virus, the World Health Organization has warned of vaccine nationalism.
Vaccine nationalism is not good. It will not help us. When we say it should be a global public good, it's not sharing for the sake of sharing. It's only because it has advantages. For the world to recover faster, it has to recover together. Because it's a globalized world. The economy is intertwined. Part of the world or few countries cannot be a safe haven and recover. They should recover together with the rest of the world.
Meanwhile, in Asia, mainland China is still trying to get the locally transmitted infections under control. China has recorded 37, while South Korea reported 20 infections overnight.
Meanwhile, in India, the number of COVID-19 infections has crossed 2 million, as the country reported a record of more than 62,000 cases. The Health Ministry says 886 people lost their lives in the past 24 hours, with the toll over 41,000. India has the third highest caseload in the world after the United States and Brazil. The virus has surged nationwide since the government began lifting lockdown in a bid to rescue the economy. Meanwhile, community health volunteers have gone on a strike, complaining they were ill-equipped to respond to the wave of infection in rural areas. Around 900,000 health workers participated in the protests, saying they were not given personal protective equipment or additional pay. While in Pakistan, 17 more people have died from COVID-19 in the last 24 hours, raising the total to 6,052. The Health Ministry says 782 cases were reported overnight as the tally crossed the 282,000 mark. The ministry said over 258,000 people have recovered from the virus so far. It said there are now over 18,000 active cases in the country. Sindh remains the worst hit province with over 122,000 infections, while Punjab has reported more than 94,000 cases. Meanwhile, the government has announced to reopen tourism and hospitality sector, cinemas and sport activities, among others, from Monday. Moving on now, Switzerland has signed an agreement with US-based biotechnology company Moderna to get early access to the potential COVID-19 vaccine. Under the agreement, Switzerland will get 4.5 million doses of the drug. The Swiss government is also talking to other companies and has allocated $329 million for the acquisition of a possible cure. Meanwhile, Japan is also expected to sign a vaccine deal with AstraZeneca for over 100 million doses. AstraZeneca says will start supplying the vaccine overseas in September and is expected to begin clinical trials in Japan later this month. Now in Sri Lanka, the ruling alliance of the Rajapaksa brothers has won a two-thirds majority in parliamentary elections. Official results say the Sri Lanka People's Front has bagged 145 out of 225 seats and 5 more from its allies. The party received 6.8 million of the popular vote. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and his brother Gotabaya have secured the supermajority needed to carry out the promised constitutional changes. Gotabaya Rajapaksa said the results indicate an excellent victory for the SLPP. The opposition of former Prime Minister Ranil has been trounced, having lost all but one of the 106 seats it held in the outgoing parliament. More news coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back now. Moving on with the news stories. The U.S. Health Secretary says his upcoming trip to Taiwan is designed to reaffirm Washington's partnership with Taipei. In an interview, Alex Azar praised Taipei for its transparency and cooperation in the public health field. He said the visit is about Taiwan and the U.S. as well as the joint partnership in public health. On Wednesday, China slammed Azar's visit to Taiwan, which Beijing considers a renegade province. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin said Taiwan remains the most important and sensitive issue in Sino-US relations. He said Beijing opposed any official interactions between Washington and Taipei. This will be the highest level visit to the territory by a US official in 4 decades. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says US Special Representative for Iran Brian Hook is stepping down. In a statement, Pompeo said U.S. envoy for Venezuela Elliot Abrams will add Iran to his role following a transition period with Hook. Pompeo did not give a reason for Hook's decision to leave. It was not clear when Hook will finish, but the announcement comes at a crucial time for U.S. diplomacy on Iran. The UN Security Council prepares to vote next week on a US bid to extend an international arms embargo on Iran. If unsuccessful in extending the arms embargo on Iran, the US has threatened to trigger a return of all UN sanctions under a snapback process. Moving on, Libya's government says it welcomes US sanctions on 3 individuals and a company alleged to be smuggling fuel and drugs to Malta. In a statement, the National Oil Corporation said the network has made significant attempts to destabilize the country. Now, the NOC said they will continue to submit reports to the Security Council and follow legal procedures to hold all these people and entities accountable. Earlier, the U.S. Treasury Department announced sanctions on Libyan national and a Malta-based firm, Al-Wifq Limited, for illegal activity. The department's Deputy Secretary Justin Muzinik said the conflict in Libya stems from competition for control of smuggling routes. European stocks are trading low ahead of a key U.S. federal jobs report and amid rising tensions between Washington and Beijing. Frankfurt's DAX is fractionally low. London's FTSE 100 has lost marginally. CAC 40 in Paris is also down. Pan-European Stoxx 600 is less than 0.5% lower. Earlier, stocks in Asia declined over US orders to ban transactions with app giants Tencent and ByteDance. Iraq says it will make an additional cut in its oil production of about 400,000 barrels per day in August as per the OPEC Plus supply reduction pact. In a statement, the oil ministry said the oil output cut in August will be over and above the agreed cut for the month. The OPEC and allies began a record supply cut in May to bolster oil prices hammered by the coronavirus crisis. Iraq is cutting output by 1.06 million barrels per day under the deal. Baghdad says it's committed to the OPEC Plus agreement and will boost compliance. The country had told OPEC Plus it will make up for overproduction in May and June through larger cuts in later months. Iraq's total oil exports for July averaged 2.76 million barrels per day. And now let's have a look at the weather updates across the globe. Well, that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.